Sir Kenneth Macmillan, principal choreographer of the Royal Ballet, celebrates his 60th birthday with the gala premiere of his latest work at the Royal Opera House, Covent Garden. The Prince of the Pagodas is a full-length ballet to music by Benjamin Britten. The leading roles of the Prince of the Pagodas and the Princess Rose are danced by Jonathan Cope and Darcy Bussell. Kenneth Macmillan has been a choreographer since 1953. Since then, he has created more than 50 new works, 5 of them full-length ballets. Of these, 3 have been outstandingly popular and commercial successes for the Royal Ballet. A new full-length work by Macmillan is a major event in the ballet world. All the more so because he is a highly controversial figure. For many years, he has divided the critics.
Macmillan is an extraordinarily important figure, an extraordinarily significant figure. And what he has done will, I think, be seen in the future as profoundly influential and beneficial.
I felt that Macmillan, who had started very much in the Aston tradition, had indeed sold out for a spectacular mess of pottage, and I never wanted to see those ballets over and over again.
He has many devoted disciples.
Well, he's been my whole career. He inspired me, he exploited me, he taught me, he gave me everything I've got, basically.
But he has vivid memories of hostile audiences in this country and abroad.
Berlin was horrible. The audience loved to boo. I mean, they booed everything I ever did there.
In his career, he has spent long periods of work in Germany and the United States, not so much from a spirit of adventure as a lack of ease with the powers that be in this country.
I still feel There is a class system here, an old boy network, which I never belonged to, and I've always kicked against, and always will.
But in 1983, he was invited to Buckingham Palace with his wife Deborah and their daughter Charlotte to become only the third British choreographer to receive a knighthood. The Prince of the Pagodas is Macmillan's first full-length ballet for 9 years, and its creation has had as many difficulties as his career.
I've been thinking about doing Prince of the Pagodas for about the last 10 years. I always loved the music. I found the storyline very weak, and for all these years I've been trying to get the estate of Britain to change their ideas about having a new story attached to it.
Yeah, now that they should be together, both of you.
In fact, I went to see Prince Britain about a week before he died, and I was allowed into his bedroom for about 10 minutes to talk to him about it. Because I didn't get a very definite answer about what I should do.
After Britain's death, negotiations dragged on, and then further delay was inevitable when in 1984 he went to work with Baryshnikov in New York.
Also, I got very ill. I got cancer of the throat. I recovered from that, and then last year we were on tour in America, and I got very ill there. I had heart failure, but luckily I recovered.
Which way did you go? Sideways?
I mean, the Royal Ballet was very good because they gave me a whole year to do it in. Because the doctor had said to me, really, you should only be working an hour and a half a day, which I did for about 6 months. So it was slow going, you know, and it took all that time, but I made it.
Yeah, why don't you do it out of it, the jeté, and then hop round that way?
Tetsuya Kumakawa, who dances the Fool in The Prince of Pagodas, joined the company straight from the Royal Ballet School, aged 16, the age at which Kenneth Macmillan himself joined the company from the school in 1948 as a dancer.
He was a very good classical dancer. He could have had a career as a dancer alone if he wanted to.
I hated the drudgery of having to go to class every single day to keep in shape to be a dancer. I got very bored with that side of it.
He was a remarkable classical dancer. Something people forget that he was a classical virtuoso.
The sort of things I was given to dance, I also thought were very boring. And the sort of virtuoso divertissement pieces where you just come on and do pyrotechnics.
I remember Kenneth as a dancer. From the first days of his career with Sadler's Theatre Ballet, where he was appearing in a variety of very jokey roles, and also appearing as a very serious romantic performer in things like Les Sylphides, and as the moon in a ballet by Alfred Rodriguez called Bad Wedding. And of course in a comedy role that was made for him as Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Moriarty both in a work called The Great Detective by Margaret Doe. His finest role, I think, was with John Cranko in The Lady and the Fool, where he was the serious clown. He was a beautiful, romantic performer. He also had a wonderful sense of humor.
I wanted to do more. I thought I should be an interpretive dancer, but I never got the opportunity to do anything like that. So I couldn't wait to finish, really. I had stopped dancing when I was about 23, I think, mainly because I had the most terrible attack of stage fright, and I just hated performing. And I sort of turned to choreography as a release from dancing. And I was lucky enough that the first thing I did, everybody liked.
In fact, he only got his opportunity when someone dropped out at the last minute. He had 1 week to create his first work. It was called Somnambulism.
It was done on one of our little concerts somewhere, and it was incredibly good. We were all very excited, and realized at last we found another will-be English choreographer, Will Merritt.
Somnambulism used this kind of third-string jazz by Stan Kenton, and it was obviously based on classical technique, but it was a very new and jazzy way of using that technique, it was quite clear that a new force had arrived in ballet.
Almost immediately, Ninette de Valois commissioned Macmillan's first work for the Sadlerswells Theatre Ballet. It was Danse Concertante, set to music by Stravinsky.
I tried to match the spikiness of the Stravinsky music and the sort of offbeat quality and jazzy quality of the music. And I've seen it recently, actually, and I think that still stands up. It's a topless ballet, but I broke a lot of the rules of straightforward classical dancing. I mean, when you look at ballet in a classroom, I mean, what the teacher wants is harmonious line to music, and I made it not harmonious. I mean, very like the music, which isn't. It's very spiky and broken up. And I broke up all the lines of the body, really, which makes it very different.
I think the first night of Danse Concertante is vastly memorable, because suddenly the curtain went up. There our dancers looking different from anything one had seen before at that time, doing different things. Here was a young man absolutely fizzing with ideas, fizzing with classical steps which he was turning around, altering, giving new aspects to. A young man who had seen the theatre and the cinema and been amused and entertained and intrigued by things he'd seen there. And he suddenly found ways of putting this already into dancing, so that hands became masks, fingers pointed, arms were just seen coming out of the wings. This was wildly exciting. It was a great sort of, like a cork out of a bottle of champagne, these ideas suddenly poured out and fizzed all over the stage. And the dancers, as always, looked marvellous.
In Danse Concertante, Macmillan first worked with the designer who was to be his collaborator more than 30 years later on The Prince of the Pagodas, Nicholas Georgiadis.
Was it straight away an easy relationship with Kenneth?
Actually, no. It was never easy because of the complexity of his work. And it's the same now. It hasn't changed, this relationship, because you can't do a straightforward, literal interpretation of what he wants. And also you can't do the decorative interpretation of what he wants. It has to be both.
Really, when you're designing for a dancer, you have to only design that part of the body, because the legs really should be seen and hardly covered. So, I mean, as a designer, I mean, he wants to put everything onto the body, which I understand. In some cases, that's not possible. So those are sort of things we fight about.
Yeah, Teddy, can you bend your legs more? Yeah, but one after the other.
In every movement he creates, there is also a psychological background. It's not decorative movement.
Bend.
Therefore, you know, it makes a great demand on one's imagination to have costumes that are sort of easy to move in, decorative, and at the same time they have to express some of this background to all the dances you create.
That's it.
The other thing that marked him out as a choreographer from the beginning, apart from vocabulary, was a very strong, pungent sense of character.
It came with his second ballet, which was House of Birds, where he told the story of some young boy and girl who are trapped by a witch and who turns people into birds.
The House of Birds was taken from a story in a Grimm's fairy tale. Even then, for Macmillan, a fairy tale becomes a vehicle for an exploration of the human psyche.
wanted to portray the dilemma of people living and working and being with each other. I wanted to show that kind of thing in ballet, and that at that time, in the early 50s, that was not a very popular thing to do. I think people were, in choreography, were very interested in the purely decorative side of ballet, and I was not.
If all art is autobiography, it must be admitted that some is more autobiographical than others, and somehow one feels that with someone like Macmillan, one's dealing with someone like Picasso, that somehow a key to his work is partly in his life.
I don't know whether the work was autobiographical. I'd had a fairly dramatic life as a young person. Both my parents died when I was very young. We were quite a poor family. My father had been gassed in the First World War, and he came back very disillusioned. He tried a chicken farm and he went bankrupt. He worked in the mines, he worked as a chef, he worked as a labourer, any job really that he could get hold of, because he had 4 children to support. And we were very, very poor. I lived through the war, which was very dramatic. I lived through all the air raids. It's not like a child growing up now, you know. So it was a very dramatic time. And I found refuge in a cinema, really. Seeing all the movies of the time. And they were a huge influence on what I did in the theatre. I don't think they were particularly autobiographical. I drew on experiences, of course, that had happened to me and I used in my ballet.
And the war was still in his mind in 1958, when he made The Burrow.
It was inspired by Kafka's story called The Burrow, and it was about rabbits actually being pursued underground. And I changed that into a sort of metaphor for people that were persecuted during the war.
The Burrow was significant for another reason. As the girl, he cast a young dancer from Canada called Lynn Seymour.
I had just joined the company, and I think he would love to have done a lot more things with that character, but he just had to struggle with somebody who was young and inexperienced and not very able. Like so many of Kenneth's ballets, it's been praised down to really a feeling that you feel inside yourself. And these people lived it out, a sort of living nightmare, I suppose, of not being able to leave, being closeted in a tiny, tight nut of society, and not being able to get away from any of the horrors of it, totally locked with each other. Within it, their love also blossomed, which was sort of extraordinary. And he just kind of put life into a tiny nutshell.
There was always this sense of people slightly at odds with the world. Always it was the choreography of a lonely man. Very soon, this concept of the outsider, the concept which it's become a cliche of Macmillan criticism, but a concept that ran through so much of his work, became very apparent.
A lot of people go on about the outsider figure in my ballets. I get a bit bored with it, really. I suppose there is an outsider figure in really all the things that I do. I don't know whether it's particularly me. Of course, like all boys of my age during the war who did dancing, I mean, that was something that not every young boy did. So by doing it, I felt a bit out of the crowd anyway.
Did your family understand about your desire to dance?
I hadn't really started dancing at all when my mother died. My father was certainly alive. I mean, I think he thought it was a bit mad. I mean, he didn't really understand. not a ballet dancer. The very first ballet I saw in my life wasn't until I got a scholarship to Sadler's Wells Ballet School. And I remember going to the new theatre because the company were appearing there then, and I saw Giselle and Fassard. And I remember seeing it, and I thought, it was as if I'd been watching ballet all my life. I mean, it wasn't surprising at all to me. It was exactly as I imagined it. And I was hooked from that moment on. And also, when I got to the ballet school, I found other kids there that had the same obsession that I did. Unlike the grammar school where I went to in Yarmouth, where I was an outsider, actually, there. I mean, the only dancing they saw was on the silver screen. I mean, they'd never seen any live dancing. So I think it was regarded as sissy, yeah. And I remember telling my headmaster that I'd got a scholarship to the Wells School, and him announcing it to the whole school, and I nearly died of embarrassment because I didn't realize he was going to do anything like that. And I fled from the school that day and never went back.
2 years after the Borough, again with Seymour, in the invitation, Macmillan showed that there would be no limit to the subject matter he would draw on for his works.
It was based on two things, actually. A South American film called The House of the Angel, and a Colette short story. And I combined the two stories, and it was about an Edwardian house party where guests arrive, and one of the male guests gets very interested in the young girl of the house, and in fact he rapes her.
In this one, I think it was the film he saw first, because he, like myself and many of our sort of generation, were much influenced by film, as we didn't have television actually. So films were our magic. It was the time of the Nouvelle Vague in cinema. John Osborne, the kind of kitchen sink people, as they called them in those days, were coming out. It was really an exciting time in the theatre.